Hi all, short story class, well, creative writing class. It's hot out, really hot, and my hair, humid. Best I can do. Office, how are you? Just some quick notes on the quiz that I am returning and kind of how it works with everything else that's coming up. You have something fun coming up, which is the whole truth assignment due on the 10th. And that just kind of gives you some general directions about kind of getting into voice and writing naturally and so forth. It's just sort of an exercise to limber up in terms of your creative writing, so to speak. On the other hand, I do have kind of a pattern with the way that I present the modules, and so this quiz that you took is not gratuitous. You do one of these for each one of the units that come up. So yes, I'll be one for poetry and one for the playwriting section as well. And one way, I mean, obviously grading can be kind of a subjective affair, that I try to be fair to students when I'm grading is to have you demonstrate how you can apply the elements of the book. So sure, I mean, some people, they make you nuts, don't they? But some of them are more gifted than others, just in terms of, yeah, I've just sort of been writing stories since I was a little kid. I was born that way, and that is not the case for all of us. Speaking as a poet as opposed to being a fiction writer, I know that whenever I tried to write short stories myself at first, I really should have been cautioned to outline what I was doing a little bit more. That's why you have an extra credit plan, for instance, to consider. And even though we had talked about the elements of a short story, which is what you were quizzed on, I got so busy just trying to move my characters around. It was really hard to follow the structure and design, for instance. So it takes a lot of work to be able to really get to the point where you can write some really great stuff, and that's as it should be. I don't want you to worry. The main thing is to try and have fun, but I am looking for people to be able to demonstrate that they're familiar with the elements in the book and they can demonstrate that. So it's one sort of way to sort of keep grading kind of fair across the boards. So yes, I always give you rubrics, and the rubrics usually tie in to the stuff that's being used in the chapter. So you should see, in terms of the returns that I gave you today, why it's important to kind of get back into the chapter and use the book in that particular way. Every chapter is set up the same way. We will use almost all of it. So while I'm sorry that you were assigned to have to use a textbook, we're definitely getting our money's worth, so to speak. But each chapter opens with not assuming people know a whole lot about each type of creative writing that we're doing. So yes, there's a description and explanation of the short story, what fiction is, and then it kind of talks about what it isn't in terms of literary fiction, which is what we're doing, compared to genre fiction. Absolutely nothing wrong with genre fiction. Stephen King, for instance, was on Good Morning America talking about his recent work, and he's he does so many genres and he does them beautifully. It's just as challenging to write, for instance, good science fiction or good detective fiction or good romantic fiction, whatever it is, using the genre and those conventions and rules, as it is to do the literary kind. The reason we start with that, usually in an introductory creative writing class, is yes, you're in an academic environment, but the other reason is it's just real bare bones, skeletal kinds of work that you're doing here. A very simple short story with trying to be as ambiguous as you can, because real life contains a lot of ambiguity. Was this a good thing or a bad thing that so-and-so broke up with so-and-so? Could be good, could be bad, right? Life is an open book, and then we hope that as one door closes, another opens, and so forth. So what you make out of things and what you're exploring, it's the same thing. It's a very performative kind of thing that actors do. Is they learn their lines and they study to do a particular character. They learn about that particular play. They learn about the history, all those kinds of things. But meanwhile, they're also exploring their own inner worlds to figure out the best way to merge what they have to say as an artist in that particular situation. Same thing goes for musicians. Some of you prefer particular genres of music from one to the other, but no matter what, we're always kind of looking to explore what we have to say, and the music is just a different kind of language than using words, right? So not that genre writing is bad or genre fiction is bad. It's fascinating, it's world blending, and you have to be every bit of as good of a writer. We just don't have that kind of time in terms of the exploration we need to do. And then again, we have the need for ambiguity as opposed to kind of the clever work with a formula that you might see in genre writing. I really harp, as you can tell with these quiz returns, on your use of the elements, right? I couldn't tell from all the responses, not that you should be a parrot repeating back exactly what the book says. I want to make sure that you can say what you understood from it, so that it's great to paraphrase and put in your own words. It's what I want you to do. But I have to be able to tell that you understand what is the structure for short stories. What are those options? What kinds of design work can you do? Character, are we working with protagonists, antagonists, main characters? What kinds of aspects are we going to use to build those particular characters? What kinds of nuances do they have? I mean, if you take Tinny Marie and her mother, for instance, really interesting characters, even though one is a child, and then you see that interplay of their relationship, right? And dialogue. Maybe it's hard to write good dialogue. It's hard to use the format correctly, but again, that's another reason why I had you look at the both of those stories for the quiz, because they demonstrate how to use dialogue really well. You indent for each speaker, you use direct quotations, and with dialogue you have the chance to advance your plot and reveal your character in really interesting ways. So you can get a lot done by using dialogue, and it's required. Setting, I would say in a short, keep it as simple as possible. For instance, if you choose the conveyance that has stopped conveying, most people do like to use elevators, but there's all kinds of occasions, right, where how you're supposed to get there is not doing what it's supposed to do. So setting is important, or maybe you want to make a point about a particular kind of setting. Can really get a sense. Bonnie Jo Campbell is a Michigan writer. You really get sort of a Midwestern feel to that particular story, I think. And then that goes right along with point of view. Is it a third? What kind of a third? Is it a first? All of these choices are things that you have to consider as you work with your story. Some of you will be lucky and it just seems like the character just shows up and starts doing what the character is supposed to do, and it starts to write itself in that particular way. Others of you might be like mine with my first one, which, by the way, was not very good, right? But I got a B on it. I almost got a B in the class. It about wrecked me, but I learned, right? But I'm looking for your use, for your demonstration. You're aware of how to use those elements. Sure, some people may be more gifted than others. Not to really worry about that right now, but it's kind of a rehearsal period where you're trying to put these parts together. Then after the elements are presented, you get a list of them, and then the book author goes through each one of them and gives you several pages and examples of each element and how it's used. That'll be true for every chapter that you get. And you can't commit each thing to memory, but everything's open book anyway, so you don't really have to. So you may be doing the same thing I do with my friend the Post-it, or putting annotations in the margin. doesn't matter, but those are the kinds of things I'll be looking for. And as your author points out, even though it's a short, not like a 10 to 15 page story, and yes, you can go over some if you need to, it's still a full story. It's still a full stop, and it has that whole arc that a story is going to have, like Rhyme Game does, right? And some of you even liked Ron Carlson's A Kind of Flying because of how economical it was, right? So a lot of it really had to do with structure and design and the way details were carefully arranged. And it's really kind of magical when you get a chance to start playing with it. So he does break down each element with the details. You want to keep it simple. And then what I love is, even though you may not be in love with looking at textbooks, you get a checklist for each thing. So it should be no mystery as to how to consider your story before you turn it in. And then most of you chose a Kickstart. If you make some changes, let me know, but some people do. But what you should be able to get from this is the quizzes that I give are never willy-nilly just to give you some busy work and to have an assignment. Everything is sequenced so that it gives you some fundamentals that you're going to need for the rest of the assignments, right? So with this one, you had kind of a hello, and then you've got some guts now with that chapter 2. Then you'll have kind of a dress rehearsal, play with your voice a little bit in the truth assignment, and then you'll have the first submission of the short. So I'm always looking for you to be able to demonstrate, do you have the nuts and bolts of the chapter under command before you're really producing the creative works yourselves. So yes, you're valuing ambiguity and open ending. And then the only other question I wanted you to be thinking about is, I'm fine with all the prompts that you chose, and also your strategies sounded pretty good, but because they are based on your experience, and they should be. People write out of what they know, they write out of their experience or what feels real to them, right? Some people are highly imaginative, and it's almost like their inner world is the real one or the realistic one to them. Everybody's a little different in that way. But what you want to think about is, how are you going to make it sound like fiction as opposed to like a narrative you write for a 101 class, a Christmas or something like that, right? Those are really great pieces to read, and they probably contain some fictional elements. I think all of us have a relative who said, oh yeah, the fish I caught was this big, right? Or, yeah, there were real sharks there. Stuff like that. This is fiction. You get to make stuff up. You get to make up characters that are based on people you know, or you take little bits here and there. A very famous novelist from here, Terry McMillan, who wrote what became the movie Waiting to Exhale, for instance. She's from Port Huron. Her first book was called Mama, and it barely changes some of the names. And so if you read the book Mama by Terry McMillan, you can. It's good. It's not as good as the ones that come later, but it's pretty gritty and realistic, and you can tell that some things have been changed, but not a lot. And I think she probably got better at it as she went along, and she got sued. She won the suit because, after all, she did label it as a work of fiction. So her relatives that sued because they felt that their character had been defamed or whatever were just fodder, really, for McMillan's exploration of what Port Huron life was like for her, what her family was like for her, what the everydayness of working in the factory. And some of the things not changed very much from what your grandparents may even tell you. So just these things to consider, but I definitely want you to have fun with both assignments, but I also wanted to put in place for you not only some tips from the chapter that were evident, which is why I have you read the book on your own time, but the things I'll be looking for, because I want you to do well and I want you to succeed. Do not forget that I'd love it if you came here to the office. I'm here a lot, and we can just, even if it's evenings, weekends, whatever you can do, that's fine. You're more than welcome to visit me on campus. But Microsoft 365 is a real thing, and you have access to Teams, which is pretty similar to Zoom, only we can talk forever. You could even record the conference if you want to go back and refer to it, but we can meet in at a preferred time for you. And again, it's fine with me. If you have kids running in the background, that's okay. If your dryer's running in the background, that's okay. That's the point of taking an online class. Some of you have to travel for your job, so it gets really crazy. So even if you can only work with me for 10 minutes, I might be able to clear something up in a 10-minute Teams call or a phone call that might have really been vexing you and you just couldn't think of a way out. Sometimes people just like, because writing is kind of the exploration, it's all problem solving, they sort of need to talk it out as they would any other kind of issue to get a feel for what they're trying to do. So any and all of that is fine. It's my favorite part of the job. I never get tired of these kinds of things. Although you can see just by looking at me that this is clearly not my first rodeo. I've been here for a long time. Oh, these are my real teeth though, just saying. So just let me know what you need. And I hope that everything's going okay, except I need to drink more water. I'm really getting a headache already. Go drink some water and take care of yourselves and each other.